Have you ever wondered what it would have been like to stand in the middle of a crowd watching a public execution with thousands of other people? I couldn't stop thinking about how something so horrifying became one of the biggest public spectacles of the Middle Ages. Today, I'm taking you into a world where justice wasn't just carried out, it was put on display for everyone to see. Public executions were woven into everyday life in London, the largest and most important city in the kingdom. The earliest recorded execution there took place in 1196, but there's no doubt that people were being put to death in the city long before the 12th century. London provided the perfect stage for some of history's most infamous executions. As the authority of the state grew stronger, public punishments became an important tool for discouraging crime. The idea was simple. If people witnessed the consequences with their own eyes, they might think twice before breaking the law. Over time, the crowds became larger and larger. People gradually grew accustomed to the spectacle of violence, and executions turned into events that attracted huge audiences. While executions during the medieval period were always carried out in public, London transformed them into something that felt almost theatrical, where punishment became a performance as much as a sentence. The Middle Ages are often remembered as a harsh and unforgiving era, with battles and clan wars breaking out on a regular basis. But have you ever imagined what it might have felt like to fight in one of those battles yourself? What if you could step into the boots of a legendary warrior and carve out your own story? That's exactly why I'm excited to be partnering with Raid Shadow Legends, a game that brings that fantasy to life. It's a mobile game that delivers console quality graphics right on your phone, along with nearly endless ways to build, customize, and strengthen your champions. It's seriously a lot of fun, and best of all, you can jump in completely free. When you start playing, the first thing you'll do is choose your starter champion, and I'm here to help make that choice a little easier. My eyes always go straight to the Orc champion, Galek. He's incredibly fast and absolutely shines in raids and dungeons. If dealing massive critical hits is more your style though, Elhain is an incredible option. She can dish out huge damage and is perfect for players who love hitting hard. Then there's Athel, who really stands out in PvP in the arena thanks to an ability that grants her an extra turn, giving her a serious advantage in battle. Finally, there's Kale, an outstanding all-around champion. His poison abilities are incredibly useful. He has a powerful area of effect attack, and he remains valuable even after you've unlocked plenty of other champions. Personally, I chose Elhain because I enjoy putting out as much damage as possible. But if you're just getting started, I'd probably recommend Kyle. He's a fantastic beginner champion and will make you feel like the legendary hero you're meant to become. There's also a fun event happening right now called Love is in the Air. Even battle-hardened champions deserve a little romance. All you need to do is download the game using the link in the description, then head over to raidlovequest.plarium.com. The event runs until March 14th, so there's still plenty of time to play the minigames, and you might even win an Amazon gift card. If you're already a raid player, you can join the celebration too. Just visit raidlovequest.plarium.com to grab a special promo code that everyone can redeem for a small Valentine's gift from us. And if you're still not convinced, here's one more reason to give it a try. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen to receive exclusive rewards worth $35. You'll get the epic champion Jotun, 100,000 silver, 50 gems, and 2 epic skill tomes. If you're quick enough, you might even be able to join my clan. Now that that's out of the way, it's time to dive into one of the darkest chapters of medieval history. Have you ever wondered what someone had to do to become the first person whose execution was officially recorded by name in London? I was surprised to learn that his story didn't begin with crime at all. It began with ideals, growing support, and a movement that eventually terrified the people in power. The first person whose execution was recorded by name in London was William Fitz-Osbert, better known as Longbeard. He came from a respected family and had fought in the Third Crusade in 1190 before returning home to England. After coming back, he became a passionate advocate for the poor. He organised public gatherings and delivered powerful speeches at St Paul's Cathedral, encouraging ordinary people to stand together. The English historian William of Newburgh wrote that Osbert had begun a powerful conspiracy inspired by the zeal of the poor against the insolence of the rich. His message struck a chord with thousands of people. Before long, he had gathered more than 52,000 supporters. Weapons were secretly stockpiled throughout London, and his followers prepared to force their way into the homes of the wealthy, even though Osbert insisted that he remained loyal to King Richard I. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Hubert Walter, believed the movement had become too dangerous to ignore. Knowing the authorities were closing in, Osbert sought refuge inside the Church of St Mary Le Bow, but sanctuary didn't save him. Hubert Walter ordered the church to be set on fire. As Osbert escaped from the burning building, he was stabbed in the stomach, captured and placed under arrest. After being convicted of treason, his punishment began with the first stage of one of medieval England's most infamous executions. He was dragged through the streets behind a horse on a wooden hurdle until he reached the execution site at the Elms in Smithfield. There he was hanged alongside 9 of his companions, but hanging was only one part of the sentence. The victim would be suspended by the neck until he was close to death, but not quite dead. Then he would be cut down so the execution could continue. At that point, the condemned man was often castrated, disemboweled, or subjected to both punishments. In many cases, his entrails and genitals were burned before his eyes. The final stage was quartering, when the body was cut into 4 pieces. As horrifying as it sounds, carrying out this punishment actually required a disturbing amount of skill. The executioners had to keep the prisoner alive through the first 2 stages for as long as possible, making sure the full sentence was carried out exactly as intended. If you think every execution in medieval England was carried out the same way, that's where the story takes an even darker turn. The punishment often depended on who you were, what crime you had committed, and how the authorities wanted your death to be remembered. For ordinary people, hanging was by far the most common form of execution. The condemned person would either stand on a cart that was pulled away beneath them or climb a ladder before the executioner shoved them off. In either case, they were left hanging, slowly strangled by the weight of their own body. Not everyone faced the gallows, though. People convicted of heresy, along with women found guilty of treason, were usually sentenced to be burned alive. At the time, a woman who murdered her husband was considered to have committed treason because society viewed her as betraying someone regarded as her superior. Some crimes involving money carried equally brutal punishments. Offences such as clipping coins, cutting small amounts of precious metal from their edges were punishable by burning, and that remained the law well into the 18th century. Beheading was another method of execution, but it was generally reserved for people of high status. The earliest recorded execution on Tower Hill took place in 1388. Although a small number of important prisoners were executed within the grounds of the Tower of London itself, many more were brought to Tower Hill, where there was far more room to accommodate the enormous crowds that gathered to watch. A beheading with either an axe or a sword was far from guaranteed to be quick or clean. Some unfortunate victims had to endure 2 or even several blows before the executioner finally succeeded. Whenever that happened, the crowd didn't stay quiet. Instead, spectators openly mocked and jeered at the executioner for his clumsy and incompetent performance. And as grim as these public spectacles already were, some executions would become so famous that people travelled from far and wide just to witness them with their own eyes. Have you ever wondered whether these executions actually frighten people into obeying the law? The truth is, the crowd didn't always react the way the authorities expected, and sometimes the person meant to be remembered as a criminal ended up becoming a hero instead. By carrying out executions in the most public way possible, the government hoped to make an unforgettable example of the condemned. Thousands of people were gathered to witness the punishment, especially in cases of treason where the sentence was deliberately made as severe as possible. The goal was to remind everyone watching of the consequences of challenging the authority of the crown, but public opinion didn't always follow the official script. Some prisoners became so popular that the crowd shouted words of encouragement and even threw flowers as they were led to their deaths. Instead of destroying a person's reputation, an execution could sometimes transform transform them into a martyr. That's exactly what happened after the execution of William Fitz-Osbert. His supporters declared him a martyr and gathered every day at the place where he had been hanged. Many of the poorer people even collected handfuls of soil from the site as keepsakes in honour of their fallen leader. So many people dug up the ground that they eventually created a large pit, forcing the authorities to station guards there to keep visitors away. A similar story unfolded after the Lollard preacher Richard Wyche, the vicar of Deptford, was executed on Tower Hill in 1440. Packets of what were claimed to be his ashes were sold to devoted followers. According to contemporary accounts, so much ash was sold that it supposedly would have required the remains of several burned bodies to supply it all. Throughout the Middle Ages, 3 places in London became especially famous for public executions: Tyburn, Tower Hill and Smithfield. Each one witnessed countless deaths and became deeply connected with the city's system of public punishment. Not everyone faced execution with fear. Some prisoners walked toward their deaths appearing almost joyful, whether because of deep religious faith or simply because they believed their suffering on earth was finally coming to an end. Others reacted very differently. Prisoners who resisted violently were tied onto a sled and dragged all the way to the gallows. By this point, public executions had become part of medieval popular culture. Rather than being quiet, solemn occasions, they were often loud, chaotic, and surprisingly disrespectful. Hundreds of spectators gathered to watch, treating the event much like a form of public entertainment. In many ways, it wasn't all that different from people arriving early to get the best spot at a concert today. Spectators came long before the execution began so they could secure the best possible view of another person's final moments. The popularity of these events even gave rise to a grim sense of humour. People invented expressions like stretching to describe a hanging, while the execution itself might be jokingly referred to as a collar day or a hanging fair. Some executions were carried out at the very place where the crime had been committed. The idea was that local residents would witness justice firsthand and be discouraged from following the same path. Not everyone welcomed that decision, though. One London shopkeeper bitterly complained that he didn't want an execution taking place outside his business because he feared the terrible reputation it would bring to the building. Whenever an execution was held in a crowded area, people did everything they could to get a better view. They leaned from nearby windows, climbed onto rooftops, and even stood on one another's shoulders, all hoping to catch a glimpse of the grim spectacle. The day of an execution also followed a familiar ritual. It began when the condemned prisoner was escorted toward the place of death. Along the route, some prisoners were even allowed to stop at an inn for one final drink. Many historians believe this tradition may have given rise to the expression "one for the road." The crowd's reaction depended entirely on who was being executed and what crime they had committed. Prisoners who were especially hated often had dirt, stones, and even human waste thrown at them. If the mob became too excited or aggressive, guards sometimes had to step in and hold the crowd back before the situation spun completely out of control. And even after all of that, the execution itself was only part of the story. What happened to the bodies afterward could be just as shocking as the punishment itself. What if I told you that for centuries one of London's busiest entrances greeted visitors with something far more terrifying than a city gate? Before you even stepped inside the city, you were reminded exactly what happened to anyone who challenged the law. After an execution, the punishment often didn't end with death. London Bridge became the city's most famous place for displaying the severed heads of executed criminals, a practice that can be traced back to at least 1305. During the Middle Ages, anyone entering London from the south almost always had to cross London Bridge. That meant thousands of travellers passed beneath the gatehouse at the entrance, where the heads of the kingdom's most notorious offenders were mounted on sharp spikes for everyone to see. This grim display was reserved only for the most prominent criminals. Officials known as the Keepers of the Heads lived inside the gatehouse and looked after these macabre exhibits. Once a head had decayed so badly that it could no longer be recognised, it was removed and thrown into the River Thames below. Although it's very likely that other heads had been displayed there even earlier, the first one officially recorded belonged to the Scottish leader Sir William Wallace. According to historical accounts, there were times when as many as 34 heads stood on display together above the river, creating a chilling sight for everyone entering the city. Another place forever linked with medieval executions was Smithfield. Originally called Smoothfield, Smithfield was an open grassy area located just outside London city walls near the River Fleet. Thanks to its wide grazing land and easy access to water, it became the ideal location for a large cattle market. During the medieval summer, Smithfield was one of London's busiest gathering places. It hosted great fairs, exciting jousting tournaments, and from time to time, public executions. The area was also known as the Elms because numerous elm trees once grew there, and many of those trees were used as gallows. It was at Smithfield that Sir William Wallace suffered the punishment of being hanged, drawn and quartered. The site was also where John Badby, one of the earliest Lollard martyrs, met his fate. The Lollards were a Christian reform movement that emerged during the mid-14th century. They criticised the Roman Catholic Church and called for religious reform. Badby believed that during communion, even after the bread had been consecrated, it did not literally become the physical body of Christ. Because he refused to abandon that belief, Badby was arrested in March 1409 and declared a heretic during a trial overseen by Archbishop Thomas Arundel. His sentence was death by burning at Smithfield. Badby was placed inside an empty barrel which was chained securely to a stake. Dry wood was stacked all around him before the fire was lit. As the flames rose, he cried out for mercy. Among those watching was the Prince of Wales, the future King Henry V. Moved by what he saw, he ordered the fire to be extinguished. He then urged Badby to renounce his beliefs, promising him a full pardon along with a yearly pension if he agreed. To the astonishment of everyone present, Badby refused the offer. Remaining faithful to his beliefs, he rejected the chance to save his life and was burned to death. Smithfield witnessed many other famous executions as well. Wat Tyler, the leader of the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, was killed at the Elms, while Richard Roos was sentenced to be boiled alive after poisoning guests in the household of the Bishop of Rochester. Even today, the memory of those events has not completely disappeared. Near St Bartholomew's Hospital, a memorial plaque honours Sir William Wallace, and visitors still leave flowers there in remembrance of his life and legacy. And as disturbing as these places already were, the most infamous execution site in all of England was still to come.